All right, you've assigned your adult ESL students some homework. They've done the homework. Now, how do you check that homework and give them useful feedback? Some teachers reserve the first 10 or so minutes of the next class to go over the answers to whatever homework they assigned in the previous lesson. But there are a couple of things to consider with this method. So, first, starting the lesson by saying, "Okay, everybody, let's check the homework," is kind of a dry way to begin, even if you have a fun student centered lead in that you're going to launch into right after that. Also, if your lesson is only 60 or so minutes long, is this really the most useful way to spend the first 10 or 15 minutes of it? If you're just going around the room asking, "Okay, so and so, what did you get for answer number one?" Good. Somebody else, how about the answer to number two? This is probably going to end up taking a fair amount of time, especially if the students then have any follow up questions or they get an answer incorrect and you need to go into it a little bit more deeply and clarify it. There's a good chance that this is going to end up taking longer than you expected and then cutting into the class time that you've reserved for the actual material you're meant to be teaching in that lesson. And then that stuff gets pushed back, and then maybe you have to assign some of those tasks for homework, and then you have to check the homework the next time. So, overall, it just ends up getting a bit messy time wise, and it's really not the best way to manage the way you're using time in your lessons. And then what if, on the other hand, you've assigned some type of homework that doesn't really have cut and dry correct answers? What if you had your students read an article or write an essay or watch a video? How do you follow up and give them feedback on that? Because regardless of the type of homework it is, if you've assigned something, some sort of task for your students to do outside of the lessons together, they deserve feedback on it. So, in this video, I'll share with you three ways, three methods that you can use to give students feedback on both conventional and maybe less conventional homework assignments. And just a quick note before we jump into these three methods, the information that I'm sharing here actually follows very closely from what I just taught in my previous video about homework in general, whether to even give homework at all, how you know if you should or shouldn't, what kind of homework to assign. So, if you haven't watched that video yet, go ahead and do that now. Watch that video first. And then when you're done, come back here and just pick up right here where you left off. Okay, so let's get into it. Here are three different methods to check and give feedback on your adult ESL students' homework assignments. Method number one is to have students self check their homework. This works particularly well for concrete exercises or written accuracy exercises such as fill in the blank grammar or vocabulary tasks, maybe reading comprehension questions, any type of exercise that has defined right or wrong answers. So, how do you let the students self check? One way is to provide an answer key along with the assignment. So, when you actually give the homework for them to take home or leave the Zoom meeting and do outside of the lesson, you actually provide them with the answer key at the same time. Just make sure, obviously, that your students understand that the idea here is that they're not meant to look at the answer key right away. They're supposed to wait to look at that until after they've done the actual exercise. As long as you trust your students and you have that understanding, and your students are motivated enough to know that it's not going to serve them if they cheat and look at the answer key right away, then that option should work just fine. There's also the option of setting up your homework assignment on something like Google Forms. So if you use Google Forms, there's an option there to make the form a quiz, which basically allows you to set on the form after you've put in the questions which answers are correct. So you're basically adding this built in answer key along with your task. With this, though, the students aren't actually able to view the correct answers until after they've completed the exercise and clicked submit. So once they've done that, there will be an option for them to view answers and they can actually look and see which answers they got correct and incorrect. And there's even a way for you to input little comments about why certain answers, certain answer choices, or whatever it is were correct or incorrect. Obviously, this is going to take you a little bit of time. It's a little bit time consuming to type up or reformat whatever exercise you're assigning from the course book or whatever you're using into a Google form. But once you do, you can input the answers using that built in answer key function, and then students can check their answers themselves as soon as they've finished the assignment. So it's going to save you a lot of time from having to do any of that whatsoever in class. It already will be totally done by the time students show up to your next lesson. If you don't want to use Google Forms, or you're worried that students will just look at the answer key right away if you give it to them at the same time as the assignment, you could also wait until the start of the next class and then simply share the answer key as students arrive. So, in a physical classroom, this could look like just handing them a copy of the answer key as they walk in. Or if you're teaching on Zoom or some other online platform, then maybe you have your screen just shared with the answer key as everybody's trickling into the online meeting. Students can then, as they're arriving, take a look, compare their answers with the correct answers that you have on the answer key in front of them, and then they can have just a few minutes to ask questions about anything that they need additional clarification on. That then leaves you free to move on to the material that you have planned for that lesson. So, using an answer key in this way is going to be much more time efficient than going around the room and eliciting answers to the exercise one by one by one. It's also a nice way to encourage learner independence in that the students are responsible for checking the answers themselves and then letting you know if they need clarification. And finally, it solves that problem of what to do if, say, you assign an exercise for homework and then you're planning to go over it in, the first 10 minutes or so of the next class. You start that next class and find out that only some of your students did the exercise, right? So in that case, what do you do? It can get a little bit awkward and again, time consuming if you start calling on students one by one, but the ones who haven't even looked at the exercise yet then need time to figure out the answer for the very first time. Or do you just ignore those students completely and just call on the ones who did actually do the homework, and then the ones who didn't feel like their time is being wasted for the first 10 minutes? Again, it gets a bit messy. So, this way, by using the answer key, the ones who did do the homework can just quickly look over the answers on their own. The ones who didn't can simply ignore it. They can even take the answer key with them, do the assignment later when they have time, and then self check their answers using that answer key later on when it's convenient for them. And this whole process is only going to take a minute or so. It's probably just going to be that time that's usually kind of dead time anyway, as everybody's arriving and shuffling in and getting their books and their papers out and everything, right? You can use that time to have whoever's there quickly check their answers. If somebody arrives late, just hand them the answer key or send them the answer key in the chat. They can check later on their own time. And so this way, it's not eating up the first whole 5 or 10 or even 15 or more minutes of your lesson. Method number 2 is to give asynchronous feedback. This method works particularly well for things like writing assignments or project based assignments, even things like speaking assignments. Maybe you had students record a video or voice note of themselves as their homework assignment and send it to you. So, any kind of task that requires detailed feedback but doesn't necessarily have finite, sort of concrete right or wrong answers is great for asynchronous feedback. So, in order to give asynchronous feedback, you can record your positive and constructive comments in either a voice note or a video and then send that to your student. For example, I have a client, a teacher that I work with, who uses this method regularly and I must say beautifully. What she does is she works with students, first of all, who want to improve their pronunciation. So she works with them in live lessons, but obviously, the more practice that they can get even in between those lessons, the faster they're going to improve and the more valuable this is going to be for them. So, what she'll do is give them assignments, regular assignments each week, in which they need to respond to some sort of prompt, either through a voice note or a video, and send it to her. That's their homework. So, for feedback, she then pulls up their video or pulls up their voice note, records a video of herself listening to their voice note or watching their video, and she'll actually pause the video or the voice recording here and there, and then praise particularly good pronunciation or correct pronunciation where needed. And then once that's done, she'll send that video of herself listening to their video or their voice note and adding in her comments and feedback and corrections. She'll send that video back to the student. So imagine how helpful this is for her students to watch their teacher listening to their speech, listening to the recording that they sent her, and praising and correcting various aspects of their pronunciation. And because all of this is done just through sending these videos back and forth, it's done on their own schedules. It's done when it's convenient for them. The students are getting the same level of really in depth feedback that they might get in a live lesson but without having to schedule additional live lessons with their teacher. They record the homework when they have time. She sends her comments back as soon as she has time. So it's very convenient for both parties and a great way for her students, again, to get really valuable feedback, even in between meeting with her. So feel free to try out this same method. You could also do something very similar for writing assignments. If you had your student write an essay or some other type of written assignment, why not record a video of yourself screen sharing that essay and then actually talking through it? The student can watch a video of you going through their writing, giving positive comments and constructive comments on the structure, the use of language, the accuracy, whatever you wanted to focus on in that assignment. Method number 3 is to frame the homework as preparation for what will happen in the next lesson. This works especially well for assignments where there really aren't correct or incorrect answers at all. So, something like having the students read an article or listen to a podcast episode, or maybe one of those challenges in English that I mentioned in the previous video, like doing their weekly grocery shopping, only speaking English. For example, if you assigned students an article to read, then maybe part of the assignment, along with reading the article, is for students to, after they've read it, underline any new words or phrases that they found particularly interesting and any that they're still confused about. And then they bring that with them to the next lesson, and that's something that you go through together. Maybe you have everybody in your group class listen to a particular podcast episode for homework, and you have them come up with 2 discussion questions that they'd like to ask their classmates about in the next lesson. And then in the next lesson, they bring those discussion questions to class and they get to ask and answer those in pairs or in breakout rooms. Maybe if you have a one-to-one student and you assigned that grocery shopping in English challenge for the week, maybe you also give them a set of reflection questions that they answer on their own after they did the challenge. Things like, how did you feel in the experience? What was the most challenging thing about it? Did any misunderstandings happen? How did you deal with them? What are you the most proud of from that experience? What would you do differently next time and why? And so then the student thinks through those things on their own. They bring those reflections to you in the next lesson, and then you again talk through those together and let that influence or guide your next sort of learning venture or challenge like assignment from there. One final idea I'd like to share with you is that for any type of homework you're assigning or feedback that you're giving, it's a great idea to keep a portfolio for each of your students that they build up as your course or as your work together progresses. So, in that portfolio, you can add things like completed written assignments, projects that the student has done, any video or audio recordings, reflections that they've written about how they're feeling or how they're doing throughout your lessons together. All of this can be a very useful way for the student to then later look back at everything that they've accomplished in their learning with you, and they can get a really nice, clear overall picture of how their language use and confidence with English has evolved and improved. If you found this video helpful, let me know in the comments what you're excited to try out and any questions that you might still have about this. And don't forget to subscribe so that you don't miss any new videos. I try to put a new one out almost every week. I'll see you next time.